I was sitting on my back deck, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the waters of Lake Tahoe golden, when I heard voices coming from my private dock. Not just any voices, loud, excited tourist voices, the kind that echo across calm morning water and shatter the peace I'd paid a premium for. My name is Harrison Cole, and I'd bought this lakefront property in Incline Village, Nevada, 3 years ago specifically for moments like these. The serenity, the privacy, the fact that I owned 50 feet of pristine shoreline with a private dock that could accommodate my 24-foot boat and not much else. Emphasis on private. I set down my coffee and walked around the side of my house, following the flagstone path that led down to the water. What I saw made me stop dead in my tracks. There were 6 people on my dock, 6 complete strangers wearing life jackets, taking selfies, and loading themselves into 2 rental kayaks that definitely weren't mine. A couple in their 20s was laughing as they nearly tipped one kayak over. An older man was smoking a cigarette, flicking ash into my lake. 2 teenagers were blasting music from a portable speaker. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice firm but controlled. "This is private property." They all turned to look at me like I was the one interrupting their morning. "We paid for this," the smoking man said, waving a piece of paper at me. "Got it all arranged through the HOA. We're good until 11. My jaw clenched. "The HOA has no authority over my dock. This is my private property, and you need to leave, now." The younger woman pulled out her phone. "We have a receipt and everything. We paid $60 for a 2-hour kayak rental and dock access." "I don't care what you paid or who you paid it to," I said, walking onto my dock with purpose. "This dock is not for rent. It's not for public use. You're trespassing." That's when I heard her voice, shrill and condescending, cutting through the morning air like nails on a chalkboard. "Harrison Cole, you step back right now and stop harassing these paying customers." I turned to see Brenda Whitmore, the president of the Silver Shores HOA, marching down from the street with her signature clipboard clutched to her chest. She was 50-something, with an asymmetrical blonde haircut that she probably called edgy, but just looked like she'd lost a fight with a lawnmower. She wore her standard uniform, pressed khakis, a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on it, and an expression of absolute certainty that she was right about everything. "Brenda," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "what the hell do you think you're doing?" "Generating revenue for the community," she said, chin up, like she was announcing she'd just cured cancer. "The HOA voted last month to monetize underutilized community resources. Your dock sits empty 90% of the time, so we're putting it to good use." I felt heat rising up my neck. "My dock is not a community resource. It's my private property. It came with my deed. I pay taxes on it separately from the house. The HOA bylaws clearly state that all property within the community boundaries falls under HOA jurisdiction for the benefit of property values and community welfare," Brenda recited like she'd practiced this speech in her mirror. "That's not what the bylaws say, and you know it," I shot back. "The HOA has authority over common areas and can enforce architectural guidelines on private property. You can tell me I can't paint my house purple or put up a shed without approval. You absolutely cannot rent out my private dock without my permission." The tourists were all standing frozen now, sensing the tension. The older man dropped his cigarette and stepped on it. "I think we should just go," the younger woman said nervously. "You're not going anywhere," Brenda snapped at them. "You paid for your time and you're entitled to it." She turned back to me. "And you, Harrison, will be receiving a fine for interfering with approved HOA business and harassing community guests." That was it. That was the line. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd saved 2 years ago when I'd had to report a drunk driver on the lake. "Washoe County Harbor Patrol," a crisp voice answered. "Hi, my name is Harrison Cole. I'm at 847 Lakeshore Drive in Incline Village. I have multiple people trespassing on my private dock, and the person who sent them here is refusing to make them leave. I need an officer." Brenda's face went pale, then red, then a mottled combination of both. "You did not just call the Harbor Patrol on me." "I absolutely did," I said, keeping the phone to my ear as the dispatcher asked for more details. "Yes, madam. There are currently 6 people on my property. The person who arranged this is here claiming she has authority through the homeowners association, but this is my deeded property. No, there's no immediate danger, but they're refusing to leave." The tourists started gathering their things real quick after that. The teenagers grabbed their speaker and scrambled off the dock. The couple abandoned the kayaks and hurried up toward the street. "Wait!" Brenda shouted. "You're entitled to your rental time. Don't let him bully you." But they were already gone, practically jogging away. The older man and his companion followed quickly behind them. Within 2 minutes, the dock was clear, except for me, Brenda, and 2 rental kayaks that definitely needed to be accounted for. "An officer is on their way," I told Brenda after hanging up. "Should be here in about 10 minutes. "You're making a huge mistake," she said, but her voice wavered just slightly. "The HOA board will hear about this. We'll be discussing your continued violations of community standards at the next meeting." "What violations?" I asked. "Being on my own property, protecting my own belongings, refusing to let strangers use my dock?" "Your attitude," she said primly. "Your complete disregard for community cooperation. Your boat isn't even here right now. The dock is just sitting empty. We're trying to create revenue streams that benefit everyone's property values." "By stealing from individual homeowners?" I said. "How much have you made off my property?" "Brenda, and where's that money going?" She clutched her clipboard tighter. "The financial records are available for review at the quarterly meetings." "The quarterly meetings you schedule during business hours when most people are at work?" I said. "Yeah, I've noticed that pattern." A Washoe County Harbor Patrol boat was already approaching, its blue hull cutting smoothly through the morning water. That was fast. Officer Jake Martinez was at the helm, someone I'd met once before during a neighborhood watch meeting. He maneuvered the boat alongside my dock and stepped off, tying up efficiently. "Harrison," he greeted me with a nod. "What's going on?" I explained the situation clearly and concisely while Brenda stood there with her arms crossed, radiating indignation. I showed him the property deed on my phone, which I kept digitally stored along with all my important documents. I pointed out the property markers that clearly delineated my shoreline. I showed him the receipt one of the tourists had dropped in their hurry to leave. Officer Martinez examined everything carefully, then turned to Brenda. "Madam, do you have documentation showing you have the authority to rent this dock?" "The HOA bylaws grant us management authority over community resources," Brenda said, her voice tight. "This isn't a community resource," Officer Martinez said patiently. "This is private property, deeded specifically to Mr. Cole. His property line extends 50 feet along the shoreline here, and the dock is clearly within those boundaries. Do you have written permission from Mr. Cole to rent out his property?" "I don't need his permission," Brenda insisted. "The HOA supersedes individual ownership for community benefit. It's in the bylaws." "No HOA in Nevada can supersede private property rights," Officer Martinez said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "That's not how property law works. What you've done here is essentially stolen services and trespassed on private property. You've also collected money under false pretenses, which could be considered fraud." Brenda's face went white. "Fraud? This is HOA business. This is community improvement. How many times have you rented this dock?" I asked, a horrible realization dawning on me. She didn't answer. "Gee." "Brenda," Officer Martinez said firmly. "How long has this been going on?" 3 weeks, she finally admitted. "We started the pilot program 3 weeks ago. We've had excellent response from the rental market." I did quick mental math. 3 weeks. If she was charging $60 per rental and booking it even just twice a day on weekends and a few times during the week, she could have made thousands of dollars off my property. "Where's the money?" I asked. In the HOA Community Improvement Fund," she said defensively. "It's all documented. We're using it for neighborhood beautification projects." "You're using money stolen from me for neighborhood projects I didn't approve of and probably don't want," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "That's theft, Brenda, actual theft." Officer Martinez was writing in his notepad. "Madam, I'm going to need you to provide all documentation of these transactions. How much total money has been collected through this dock rental program?" Brenda's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll need to consult the HOA treasurer." "Who's the treasurer?" Officer Martinez asked. "I am," she admitted quietly. Of course she was. Of course Brenda Whitmore was both president and treasurer, probably because no one else wanted to deal with her nonsense. "Then you can access those records," Officer Martinez said. "I'm going to need a full accounting of all money collected through unauthorized use of Mr. Cole's property." I'm also going to need the names and contact information for everyone who rented the dock." "They signed liability waivers," Brenda said, then immediately looked like she regretted speaking. "Liability waivers?" I practically shouted. "You made tourists sign liability waivers for using my dock? What if someone had gotten hurt? What if a kid had drowned? My homeowner's insurance doesn't cover commercial rentals." That detail seemed to shake even Brenda. Her hands started trembling slightly. The HOA insurance would have covered any incidents. "No, it wouldn't," Officer Martinez said. "HOA insurance covers common areas and association liability. It doesn't cover unauthorized commercial activity on individually owned private property. If someone had been seriously injured or killed, Mr. Cole could have faced a lawsuit that would have bankrupted him, and the HOA insurance wouldn't have paid a dime." The full weight of what she'd done was finally starting to show on Brenda's face. She'd risked my entire financial future so she could play entrepreneur with my property. "I want every penny you made returned to me immediately," I said, "plus compensation for unauthorized commercial use of my property. I want it in writing that this program is terminated permanently, and I want your resignation from the HOA board." "You can't force me to resign," Brenda said, trying to recover some authority. "The board members are elected by the community." "Then I guess we'll see what the community thinks when they find out you've been committing fraud and exposing homeowners to massive liability," I said. "I'm sure that'll go over great." Officer Martinez handed her a citation. "This is for trespassing and unauthorized commercial activity on private property. You'll need to appear in court. I'm also filing a report about the potential fraud, which will be forwarded to the district attorney's office for review. They'll determine if criminal charges are appropriate." Brenda took the citation with shaking hands. "This is ridiculous. I was helping the community." "You were stealing," I said flatly. "You can dress it up however you want, but you were stealing." She turned and walked back toward the street, her clipboard hanging at her side, her usual confident stride replaced by something much more uncertain. Officer Martinez turned to me after she left. "You'll want to document everything. Take photos of the dock, the kayaks she left behind, keep that receipt. File a police report in addition to my harbor patrol report. You should also probably consult with a real estate attorney about sending a cease and desist to the HOA and potentially suing for the money she collected." "How much trouble is she in?" I asked. He considered that. "Depends on how much money was involved and whether the DA wants to prosecute. Could be anything from a fine and restitution to actual criminal charges for fraud and theft. The fact that she collected money under false pretenses and created liability exposure makes it serious. If she did this to other homeowners too, it gets even worse." That thought hadn't occurred to me. "You think she might have?" "You should ask around," he suggested. "She said this was a pilot program. People don't usually say pilot program unless they're planning to expand." After Officer Martinez left, I went back inside and did something I hadn't done in the 3 years I'd lived here. I actually read through the entire HOA bylaws document. It was 73 pages of dense legal language, but I made myself read every word. Nowhere, and I mean nowhere, did it say the HOA could rent out private property. It had provisions for managing common areas like the community clubhouse, the shared beach access 2 blocks away, and the entrance landscaping. It had architectural review guidelines. It had rules about noise, parking, and property maintenance. But nothing, absolutely nothing, gave the HOA authority to monetize individual homeowners' property. I made copies of the relevant sections, highlighted them, and saved them to a dedicated folder. Then I called my attorney, Richard Stevenson, who I'd used for the property purchase and a few other matters. "Harrison," he answered. "What's going on?" I explained the situation. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, there was a long pause. "She actually rented out your private dock," he finally said, "for 3 weeks and collected money?" "That's what happened," I confirmed. "Okay," he said, and I could hear him typing. "That's theft, commercial trespass, fraud, and possibly racketeering if she's doing it systematically. You need to file a police report immediately if you haven't already. Then we're sending a cease and desist to the HOA with a demand for full accounting and restitution. If they don't comply within 7 days, we file a civil suit." "The harbor patrol officer said the DA might press criminal charges," I told him. "They should," Richard said bluntly. "This isn't a gray area. This is straight-up theft. HOAs don't have the authority to override property rights, no matter what their bylaws say. Any clause claiming that would be unenforceable anyway because it violates state property law. What about the liability issue? I asked. She had tourists signing waivers for using my dock. That's actually the scariest part, Richard said. If someone had been seriously injured, you could have been sued into oblivion. Your homeowner's insurance would have denied the claim because it was commercial activity. The HOA insurance would have denied it because it wasn't an approved common area. You would have been personally liable. And depending on the injury, that could have been millions in damages. A chill ran through me. I thought about those teenagers on my dock that morning, about the couple nearly tipping the kayak. What if they had tipped it? What if someone couldn't swim? What if the kayak had a defect and someone had gotten hurt? I want to sue, I said, not just for the money she took, for the risk she exposed me to. We can definitely make that case, Richard agreed. I'll draft the cease and desist today. Meanwhile, document everything. Photos, videos, copies of any communications. If you have security cameras, pull that footage. If any neighbors saw anything, get statements. Build the record. I didn't have security cameras, but that was about to change. As soon as I hung up with Richard, I ordered a complete security system with cameras covering the entire waterfront side of my property. 2-day shipping. Then I started making calls to neighbors. My first call was to Frank Donovan, who lived 2 houses down and also had a private dock. Frank, it's Harrison Cole from 847. Do you have a minute? Sure, Harrison. What's up? Has Brenda Whitmore or anyone from the HOA tried to rent out your dock? Silence. Then, how did you know about that? My stomach dropped. She approached you too? About 2 weeks ago, Frank said. Sent me an email saying the HOA board had voted to create a community rental program for underutilized private amenities. Said my dock qualified and that they'd be adding it to their rental platform. I told her absolutely not, and that if anyone showed up on my dock, I'd have them arrested. She sent back some snippy reply about community cooperation, but nobody showed up, so I figured she backed off. She didn't back off with me, I said. She's been actively renting my dock for 3 weeks without my knowledge or permission. I had 6 tourists on my property this morning. Jesus Christ, Frank breathed. Did you call the cops? Harbor Patrol first, then I'm filing a full police report. My attorney's sending a cease and desist. I'm probably going to sue. I'll be a witness, Frank said immediately. I kept her emails. She had no right to even ask, let alone to actually do it without permission. Can you forward me those emails? I asked. They'll help establish a pattern. Sending them now, he said. I heard typing. Harrison, you should know she sent that email to at least 5 people on the lake. We talked about it at the boat launch. Most people ignored it or told her no. Who else did she contact? I asked, grabbing a pen. He gave me 4 more names. I called each of them. 3 confirmed they'd received similar emails and had declined. 1, an older woman named Margaret Chen, admitted that she'd actually agreed and had been splitting the rental income 50-50 with the HOA. Wait, I said. You agreed to let her rent your dock? Well, yes, Margaret said hesitantly. I'm not here most of the summer. I'm in San Francisco with my daughter. The dock just sits there, and Brenda said it would help the community and give me some extra income. I've made about $200 so far. Margaret, did you sign anything? Any contract or agreement? Just a participation form for the rental program, she said. Why? Is something wrong? I explained as gently as I could that she might have massive liability exposure if anyone got hurt using her dock. I explained that her homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover commercial activity. I suggested she talk to her own attorney immediately and probably pull out of the program. By the time I hung up, Margaret sounded terrified. I felt bad about that, but better terrified and protected than oblivious and exposed. I spent the rest of the morning documenting everything, taking photos, measuring property lines, and writing down every detail I could remember about the encounter with the tourists and Brenda. Then I drove to the Incline Village Sheriff's substation and filed a formal police report. The deputy who took my report, Officer Sarah Chen, listened carefully and took detailed notes. This is the second complaint we've had about Silver Shore's HOA in the past 6 months, she said. Second, different issue last time, she said. Something about unauthorized fines and towing. But it suggests a pattern of overreach. The Harbor Patrol report will be attached to this one, and it'll all go to the DA's office. Given the dollar amounts involved in the fraud angle, I'd expect them to take it seriously. How long does that usually take? I asked. Could be weeks, could be months, she admitted. Depends on their caseload and how complex the investigation needs to be. But you did the right thing by reporting it immediately. By the time I got home, it was early afternoon. I made myself lunch and tried to do some work. I'm a software consultant, which means I work from home most of the time, which is part of why I'd chosen this location. The peace and quiet of the lake was supposed to help me focus. Instead, I was staring at my computer screen, seeing nothing, replaying the morning's events over and over. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Cole? A woman's voice, older, uncertain, speaking. This is Patricia Vickers. I'm on the Silver Shores HOA board. I just heard what happened this morning, and I wanted to apologize. That was unexpected. You're on the board? Yes, I'm the secretary. There are 5 board members total. I had no idea Brenda was doing this dock rental thing. She never brought it to a board vote. She told us she was working on community revenue initiatives, but she said she was talking to local businesses about sponsorships for neighborhood events. She never mentioned anything about renting private property. She told the tourists and the Harbor Patrol that the board had voted on this, I said carefully. We didn't, Patricia said firmly. I've been on this board for 6 years, and we've never voted on anything like that. I went through our meeting minutes for the past year. The only thing we approved related to revenue was allowing her to solicit local business sponsorships for the 4th of July party and the winter holiday lights. So she lied, I said. Completely, Patricia agreed. Mr. Cole, I'm calling because I want you to know that the other board members are meeting tonight for an emergency session. We're removing Brenda from her positions as president and treasurer, effective immediately. We're also launching an audit of all HOA finances to figure out where the money from these rentals went. It went into the Community Improvement Fund, apparently, I said. At least that's what she told the Harbor Patrol officer. We don't have a Community Improvement Fund, Patricia said quietly. We have the operating budget and the reserve fund. That's it. If she created a separate account, that's even worse than I thought. That sick feeling in my stomach intensified. You think she might have stolen the money? I think we need a full audit immediately, Patricia said, and I think you should absolutely proceed with whatever legal action your attorney recommends. The HOA's insurance will probably cover the settlement if you sue, but Brenda needs to face consequences. This is completely beyond the pale. I appreciate you calling, I said, and for the record, I have nothing against the HOA in general. I just don't want people stealing from me. Nobody should have to deal with this, Patricia said. I'm so embarrassed this happened in our community. We'll be sending out a notice to all homeowners about the situation and the board changes. If you're willing, I'd like to include a statement from you about what happened. Let me talk to my attorney first, I said, but probably yes. That evening, Richard emailed me the cease and desist letter. It was 5 pages of legal precision, demanding immediate cessation of all rental activities involving my property, full accounting of all money collected, return of all funds within 7 business days, and written confirmation that no such activities would occur again. It also put them on notice that failure to comply would result in civil litigation for theft, fraud, trespass, and any other applicable claims. I'm sending this certified mail and email, Richard wrote in his cover message. I'm also sending copies to all 5 board members individually, since it sounds like the president was acting without board authorization. That protects the HOA to some extent, but make sure everyone knows how serious this is. 2 days later, my security cameras were installed. I now had crystal clear footage of my entire waterfront, the dock, and the approach from the street. The installer, a guy named Tom who'd been doing security work in Tahoe for 20 years, whistled when I told him why I was suddenly so interested in surveillance. HOAs are the worst, he said, running cable along my roofline. I've seen them do crazy things, but renting someone's private dock? That's a new one. Have you heard anything about Silver Shores HOA specifically? I asked. Not that I remember, he said, but I mostly work in the California side of Tahoe. Nevada side is a smaller market for me. Although, now that you mention it, I did a job in Incline Village about a year ago. Lady wanted cameras everywhere because she said the HOA was harassing her. I thought she was being paranoid, but maybe not. You remember her name? No, sorry, but it was over on Lakeshore Drive, maybe a mile from here. After Tom left, I spent some time reviewing the camera system. Everything was recording to a local server with cloud backup. Motion detection alerts would go to my phone. I could pull up live footage from anywhere. It felt like overkill, but after what had happened, I wasn't taking chances. The next morning, my doorbell rang at 8. I checked the camera feed and saw Patricia Vickers and another woman I didn't recognize standing on my porch. I opened the door. Patricia. Mr. Cole, I'm sorry to bother you so early. This is Linda Martinez. She's the HOA vice president and the interim president now that we've removed Brenda. Linda was younger than Patricia, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and an expression of professional concern. Mr. Cole, thank you for seeing us. We wanted to update you in person about what we've found. This didn't sound good. Come in. We sat in my living room, the lake view stretching out behind us through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Patricia had a folder of documents. Linda looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. We've completed a preliminary financial audit, Patricia said. It's not good. How not good? I asked. Brenda created a separate bank account under the HOA's tax ID without board authorization, Linda said. She called it the Community Enhancement Fund. She's been depositing money from various sources into it for the past 4 months. Various sources? I repeated. Patricia opened the folder. The dock rentals were just part of it. She was also charging people $50 per month to park in guest parking spots overnight. She was renting out the community clubhouse for private parties without board approval and pocketing the money. She charged 3 homeowners assessment penalties for violations that were never actually discussed by the board. All that money went into this account she controlled. How much total? I asked. Linda and Patricia exchanged glances. Just over $14,000, Linda said. I stared at them. $14,000? Your dock alone generated about $1,800, Patricia said, showing me a spreadsheet. She'd been renting it almost every day, sometimes multiple times per day. Weekends were booked solid. I felt dizzy. $1,800 from my property, without my knowledge or consent. Where's the money now? I asked. Still in the account, Linda said. We've frozen it. Our attorney says we need to hold it pending the investigation and potential litigation. Any money that was taken from illegal rentals of private property needs to be returned to the property owners. The rest is more complicated. What happened to Brenda? I asked. She resigned from the board effective immediately, Patricia said. We gave her the option to resign or be removed. She chose resignation. She's also agreed to cooperate with the audit. Has she been charged with anything criminally? Not yet, Linda said. But the DA's office contacted us yesterday. They're investigating. They've requested all our financial records and communications with Brenda. They're treating it as a potential fraud and embezzlement case. Patricia pulled out a check from the folder. This is for $1,800. It's the full amount we can document that Brenda collected from renting your dock. We're returning it to you immediately. I took the check, feeling strange about it. It was my money in the sense that it came from unauthorized use of my property, but accepting it felt weird. What about the liability issue? What if someone had gotten hurt? Our insurance carrier is reviewing the situation, Linda said grimly. They're not happy. They may try to deny coverage entirely since this was unauthorized commercial activity. If they do, and if you decide to sue, the HOA may not have coverage to pay a settlement. Which would mean what? I asked. Special assessments on all the homeowners? Possibly, Linda admitted. It depends on the reserve fund and how much any judgment might be. But yes, worst case scenario, every homeowner in Silver Shores could end up paying for Brenda's decisions. That's not fair to them, I said. They didn't do anything wrong. It's not fair to you either, Patricia said. You were the victim here. If you want to sue, you should sue. The HOA's insurance should cover it, and if it doesn't, that's a problem the board has to figure out. But you shouldn't have to eat the loss just to protect other homeowners from the consequences of Brenda's theft. She was right, but it still felt messy. These were my neighbors, people I saw at the grocery store and waved to during evening walks. I didn't want them paying for Brenda's crimes, but I also couldn't just let this go. Let me talk to my attorney, I said. I appreciate you being straightforward about all this. We'll be sending a full disclosure to all homeowners within the week, Linda said. Everyone needs to know what happened and what the potential financial exposure is. We're also voting on new bylaws at the next meeting to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. Mandatory board approval for any financial transaction over $500, quarterly external audits, term limits for officers, real oversight. That sounds like a good start, I said. After they left, I called Richard and filled him in. He was quiet for a long moment after I finished. This is bigger than I thought, he finally said. $14,000 is serious money. The DA is definitely going to prosecute. What do you think I should do? I asked. About the civil suit? Honestly, I think you wait and see what happens with the criminal case. If she's convicted, that makes your civil case much stronger. Also, the HOA has already returned your money, which eliminates the actual damages. What you'd be suing for at this point is punitive damages and compensation for the liability exposure. But I wasn't actually damaged by the liability, I pointed out. Nobody got hurt. True, but you could have been. The risk she exposed you to was real and substantial. A court might award damages just for that exposure, but it's not a slam dunk. If the criminal case goes forward and she's convicted, you could potentially get restitution through that process without needing to sue civilly. So I wait? I think you wait, Richard agreed. Keep the cease and desist active. If anything else happens, we escalate immediately. But for now, let the criminal process play out. You've got your money back, the HOA is taking corrective action, and Brenda's facing actual consequences. That's a lot more than most HOA victims get. He was right, but something about waiting felt unsatisfying. I wanted Brenda to face full consequences for what she'd done, not just to me, but to the other homeowners she'd stolen from. Over the next few weeks, the story spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Patricia and Linda sent out their disclosure letter, which was detailed and damning. It outlined everything Brenda had done, all the money she'd collected, and the potential liability exposure. The letter emphasized that the board had not authorized any of these activities and that they were cooperating fully with law enforcement. The neighborhood reaction was intense. Some people were angry at Brenda. Some were angry at the board for not catching it sooner. Some were angry at me for calling the harbor patrol and making a big deal out of it, which I found absolutely baffling. One neighbor, Gary something or other, who lived 4 blocks away and had probably never said 2 words to me before, actually came to my house to complain. You should have handled this internally, he said, standing on my porch with his arms crossed. Now we're all going to pay for your vendetta. My vendetta? I repeated, genuinely confused. She stole from me. She exposed me to massive liability. She committed fraud. What was I supposed to do? Just let it go? You could have worked it out within the community, Gary insisted. Now there's police involved, lawyers involved. Our insurance premiums are going to skyrocket. The HOA might have to levy special assessments, all because you couldn't handle a simple dispute like an adult. I felt my temper rising. She stole from me. That's not a dispute. That's a crime. And she didn't just do it to me. She did it to everyone. She stole $14,000 from this community. If you're upset about insurance premiums and special assessments, blame her, not me. If you'd kept your mouth shut, none of this would have happened, Gary said. If I'd kept my mouth shut, she'd still be stealing, I shot back. And eventually someone would have gotten hurt on my dock, and I'd have lost everything in a lawsuit. So no, I'm not sorry I reported a crime. Feel free to leave my property now. He left, muttering about neighborhood cooperation and people who didn't understand community living. I watched him go and wondered how some people's brains worked. How do you end up blaming the victim instead of the criminal? But Gary wasn't the only one with that attitude. Over the next week, I got 3 anonymous letters in my mailbox, all variations on the same theme. I was a troublemaker. I should have handled it privately. I was ruining the neighborhood. I should move if I didn't want to participate in community life. I threw them all away, but they bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The supportive neighbors outnumbered the critical ones, though. Frank brought over a 6-pack of beer one evening, and we sat on my deck, watching the sunset and talking about the whole mess. Margaret sent me a thank you note for warning her about the liability issues. She'd pulled out of the rental program and consulted with an attorney who confirmed she'd been putting herself at serious risk. Patricia kept me updated on the board's progress. They'd implemented the new financial controls and hired an independent auditor. They'd also discovered that Brenda had been making some questionable decisions about maintenance contracts, possibly involving kickbacks, but that investigation was ongoing. 6 weeks after the dock incident, I got a call from the Washoe County District Attorney's Office. A prosecutor named Jessica Brennan wanted to meet with me about the case. We met at a coffee shop in Carson City, halfway between her office and my house. Jessica was sharp, professional, maybe 40, with glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mr. Cole, thank you for meeting with me. I've reviewed the Harbor Patrol report, your police report, and all the documentation your attorney provided. I've also reviewed the HOA's financial records and interviewed several other witnesses." "What are you thinking?" I asked. "I'm thinking this is a clear case of fraud and theft," she said bluntly. "Brenda Whitmore collected money under false pretenses, misappropriated HOA funds, and exposed multiple homeowners to significant liability. The dollar amounts are sufficient for felony charges." "Felony?" I repeated. "The total amount stolen exceeds $5,000, which pushes it into felony territory under Nevada law. We're looking at charges of theft, fraud, possibly embezzlement depending on how we classify her role with the HOA. She could face up to 10 years in prison if convicted on all counts." That was more serious than I'd expected. "What happens now?" "We're presenting the case to a grand jury next week. If they indict, we'll arrest her and arraign her. Given that she's not a flight risk and this is a non-violent crime, she'll probably be released on bail. Then we move toward trial unless she takes a plea deal." "What kind of plea deal?" I asked. "Detail." "Depends on a lot of factors," Jessica said. "Her criminal history, whether she shows remorse, whether she cooperates fully and returns all the stolen money. If she pleads guilty, we might agree to recommend the lower end of the sentencing guidelines, but she'd still have a felony conviction on her record." "And restitution for the victims?" "Absolutely," Jessica said. "Part of any plea deal or sentence would be full restitution to everyone she stole from. The $1,800 from your dock, the parking fees, the clubhouse rentals, the fraudulent fines, all of it." "The HOA already gave me my money back," I said. "That doesn't change anything," Jessica said. "She still stole it. The fact that the HOA made you whole is good, but she still committed the crime, and frankly, the HOA shouldn't have had to pay that. She should." Over the next few months, the legal process ground forward. The grand jury indicted Brenda on 4 felony counts: grand theft, fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of HOA funds. She was arrested at her home on a Tuesday morning. The local news covered it, complete with footage of her doing a perp walk in handcuffs, which felt surreal. The community reaction to her arrest was mixed. Some people felt vindicated. Some felt it was excessive. A few people actually started a petition to ask the DA to drop the charges, claiming it was too harsh. The petition got 37 signatures out of a community of over 300 homes, so it didn't exactly represent a groundswell of support. Brenda's attorney, a guy named Dennis Pratt, who apparently specialized in white-collar crime, reached out to Jessica Brennan about a plea deal almost immediately. The negotiations took 6 weeks. During that time, Brenda's name became neighborhood shorthand for HOA abuse. People talked about pulling a Brenda when someone overstepped their authority. The plea deal was finalized in early September. Brenda pled guilty to 1 count of felony theft and 1 count of fraud. The embezzlement and misappropriation charges were dropped. In exchange, she agreed to pay full restitution of $14,000 to all victims within 60 days. Serve 18 months in county jail with credit for time served and possibility of early release for good behavior. 5 years probation after release, 100 hours of community service, a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Nevada. The sentencing hearing was public. I attended, along with Patricia, Linda, Frank, and about 20 other homeowners. Brenda stood before the judge in a gray suit, looking smaller somehow than she had on my dock that morning months ago. Her attorney made a statement about how she'd made terrible decisions, but had been trying to help the community. He talked about her years of volunteer service, her lack of prior criminal history, her remorse and acceptance of responsibility. Then, Jessica Brennan stood up and methodically laid out what Brenda had actually done. Not just the crimes, but the betrayal of trust, the exposure of innocent homeowners to devastating liability, the theft from a community she was supposed to serve. "This wasn't a mistake, Your Honor," Jessica said. "This was a pattern of deliberate criminal behavior over many months. Mrs. Whitmore knew exactly what she was doing. She created secret bank accounts. She forged board authorizations. She collected thousands of dollars that didn't belong to her. And when she was caught, her first instinct wasn't to apologize, but to double down and claim authority she didn't have." The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Hernandez, listened to everything without expression. Then she asked Brenda if she wanted to say anything. Brenda stood. "Your Honor, I made terrible mistakes. I got caught up in trying to improve the community, and I lost sight of legal and ethical boundaries. I never meant to hurt anyone. I thought I was helping. I'm deeply sorry for the damage I've caused." It sounded rehearsed. Probably was. But at least she said it. Judge Hernandez sentenced her to the full terms of the plea agreement and added one more condition. Brenda had to write individual apology letters to every homeowner she'd stolen from, to be reviewed and approved by her probation officer before being sent. "You violated the trust of your community, Mrs. Whitmore," Judge Hernandez said. "You took advantage of your position to commit crimes against the very people you were supposed to serve. That betrayal is what makes this so serious. Your sentence reflects not just what you stole, but the damage you did to your community's ability to trust and function together." Brenda was taken into custody immediately. She'd start serving her jail time that day. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of relief and dissatisfaction. Justice had been served, technically. Brenda would face consequences. The money would be returned. But there was something hollow about it, too. 18 months in county jail, probably out in 12 with good behavior. Then probation. Then what? She'd move away, probably. Start over somewhere else. The neighborhood would recover eventually. But the damage she'd done to the community's trust and cohesion, that would take much longer to heal. Patricia walked beside me to the parking lot. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Honestly? I don't know," I said. "I'm glad she's facing consequences. But I also feel like this whole thing was such a waste. All that energy, all that damage, all that conflict because one person thought she could do whatever she wanted." "That's usually how these things go," Patricia said. "One bad actor, lots of collateral damage. But for what it's worth, I think the HOA will be stronger for this. We've implemented real oversight now. We've got engaged homeowners paying attention. We'll probably never have another Brenda Whitmore situation." "That's something," I agreed. 3 months later, I was sitting on my deck on a cold November morning, coffee in hand, watching fog drift across the lake. My dock was quiet. My cameras showed nothing but water and birds. The HOA had sent me one of Brenda's court-ordered apology letters. It was 3 paragraphs of generic remorse that didn't sound particularly sincere, but at least it existed. The restitution money had been paid in full. Brenda had apparently liquidated some investments to cover it. The HOA had also reimbursed me for my legal fees after I submitted my bill from Richard Stevenson. Patricia and Linda were still running the board, which was now functioning with real oversight and transparency. They'd held an open meeting where any homeowner could ask questions about the incident and the reforms they'd implemented. The neighborhood had mostly returned to normal. There were still some people who blamed me for making a big deal out of nothing, but most had moved on. Frank and I had become good friends. Margaret invited me to Thanksgiving dinner with her family. The community was healing. My phone rang. Unknown number again. "Mr. Cole? This is Detective Ramon Garcia with the Washoe County Sheriff. Do you have a few minutes?" My stomach tightened. "Sure. What's going on?" "We've been investigating some additional activities related to Brenda Whitmore," he said. "During the financial audit, we found evidence that she may have been involved in similar schemes at her previous HOA in Henderson, Nevada. We're working with Henderson PD on that investigation." "She did this before?" I asked, stunned. "Looks that way. Different methods, but same basic pattern. Unauthorized fees, secret accounts, misappropriated funds. She left that HOA about 5 years ago, right before an audit was scheduled. We think she knew she was about to be caught and moved to your area to start fresh." So she's a serial HOA thief, I said. That's what it's looking like, Detective Garcia confirmed, which means her sentence might get extended if Henderson brings charges too. I wanted to give you a heads up in case you see news coverage, and also to let you know that your report and documentation were instrumental in building this case. Without you stepping forward, she might have kept going indefinitely. After he hung up, I sat there for a long time, processing. Brenda hadn't just made a mistake or gotten carried away with enthusiasm for community improvement. She was a predator who'd found a niche exploiting HOAs and homeowners. She'd done it before. She'd done it to my community. She'd probably have done it again somewhere else if she hadn't been caught. That made me feel better about reporting her. Not vindictive or petty or making a big deal out of nothing. Just someone who saw a crime and reported it. Someone who stood up for themselves and inadvertently protected future victims. The sun was burning off the fog now, revealing the deep blue of Lake Tahoe. My dock stretched out into the water, empty and peaceful. My security cameras recorded everything, but there was nothing to record except nature and beauty. I thought about that morning months ago when I'd walked down to find strangers on my dock. How angry I'd been, how violated I'd felt, how that moment had spiraled into police reports and court cases and newspaper articles and months of stress, but also how it had led to reform, real oversight, a community that paid attention now, a predator stopped before she could do even more damage. I raised my coffee mug to the empty dock, to standing up for yourself, to documentation and lawyers and harbor patrol officers who take things seriously, to neighbors who support each other and prosecutors who do their jobs, and to private property remaining private, no matter what some HOA Karen thinks she's entitled to. The lake was calm, my dock was mine, and Brenda Whitmore was in jail, exactly where she belonged. I pulled out my phone and opened the community forum, something I'd mostly ignored before all this. There was a new post from Linda Martinez about the upcoming holiday party. For the first time in years, the HOA was asking for volunteers instead of just assigning tasks. They wanted input on activities. They were being transparent about the budget. I clicked interested on the volunteer list. Maybe I'd help with setup or cleanup. Be part of the community instead of just living in it. Because that's what Brenda had failed to understand. Community isn't about control or authority or finding ways to monetize every asset. It's about people choosing to work together, respecting boundaries, and building something better than any individual could create alone. My dock would never be a community resource. It would always be my private property, protected by cameras and legal documentation and a very clear willingness to stand up for my rights. But I could be a community resource. My time, my skills, my willingness to show up and help. That was worth more than any rental income Brenda could have generated, and unlike her schemes, it was actually legal. I finished my coffee, went inside, and started my workday. The lake sparkled beyond my windows. My dock remained empty and peaceful. And somewhere in county jail, Brenda Whitmore was learning that actions have consequences, even for HOA presidents who think they're above the law, especially for them, actually. The neighborhood had learned too. Pay attention, ask questions, document everything. Don't assume that just because someone has authority, they're using it appropriately. And when you catch someone doing something wrong, speak up, report it, make noise, because silence just enables the Brendas of the world. It lets them move from community to community, leaving damage in their wake. But accountability, swift and public, stops them cold. One call to Harbor Patrol, one police report, one person refusing to let it slide. That's all it took to bring down Brenda's entire operation. One call. I made that call, and I'd make it again without hesitation. My dock, my property, my rights. End of story.